Hi there, Peter Russell from Supertax.ca. Welcome to another one of my video blogs. Today's video blog topic is going to be on child care expense deductions here in Canada. A basic and general understanding. Now, what is it and where is it? Well, let's start with where it is first. The deduction can be found on line 214 of your T1 General Canadian Income Tax Return. Specifically, it is a deduction from total income to derive net income for tax purposes for an individual. Now, what is it? Now, suppose you and a spouse have a child in which you've incurred some child care expenses. You're then most likely eligible to claim a line 214 deduction on your tax return, subject to some limitations. Now, what are those limitations? Well, suppose you have a child and the child is age 6 or younger. Then the maximum deduction for that child in a given year is $7,000. Suppose your child is between the ages of 7 and 16. Then that child's maximum deduction limit is only $4,000. Now, suppose you have a child which is also eligible for the disability tax credit. Then that child's maximum deduction limit is up to $10,000 per year. Now, who gets to claim the child care expense deduction? Well, in most cases, in a family unit of two spouses, the lower income spouse generally claims the child care expense deduction. Now, how is the child care expense deduction calculated? It's calculated on a form called a T778 and is usually the lower of three amounts. The first amount consists of total eligible child care costs from eligible children. The second amount is the combined maximum deductions for all eligible children. And the third amount is 2/3 of the earned income from the lower income spouse. Now, what is earned income? Earned income is generally employment or self-employment or business income earned by an individual. Now, what types of payments are considered child care expense eligible? Well, suppose you pay a caregiver for child care services. Those fees are usually eligible. Suppose you pay a daycare center or a nursery school. Those fees are usually eligible too. Suppose your child is enrolled in an educational institution in which there is a component of child care. The fees related to that component are also eligible. Suppose your child attends a day camp or an overnight camp. Those fees are most likely eligible too. Now, what type of payments are not eligible for the child care expense deduction? Suppose you pay for your child's medical, clothing, or transportation costs. Those are not eligible for child care. Any expenses which are reimbursed by someone are not eligible for child care deductions either. Suppose you made some payments to a caregiver who were actually a relative of you and were 18 years of age or younger. Those fees are not deductible for child care expenses. Suppose you made caregiver payments to a relative who, in fact, you are claiming another non-refundable tax credit for, such as the eligible dependent, the caregiver tax credit, the infirm dependent tax credit, or the amounts for children born 1993 and later. If you are, then those payments are not eligible either. If you are also paying one of your spouses for child care, those are not eligible either, or what is called another person who could be a common law spouse. Those are also not eligible as deductions for child care. Now, there is some circumstances where the higher income spouse can claim the child care expense deductions. What are those situations? Well, when you are the higher income spouse and you have a lower income spouse, and your lower income spouse is attending university, college, high school to prolong their education, then you in fact can claim the child care expense deductions for a specific period of that year. That is subject to a calculation which is quite complex and beyond the scope of this video. Another situation is where your lower income spouse is infirm due to a mental or physical disability and cannot care for the children for an indefinite period of time. In that case, also due to a complex calculation, a portion of those child care expenses can be claimed by the higher income spouse. Another situation is where the lower income spouse is in prison for a minimum of 2 weeks during the year. That is also another situation where the higher income spouse can claim the child care. Okay, now here's an example, a basic example of how the child care expense deduction would come about. Now let's suppose we have two spouses. Higher income spouse earns $100,000 per year. Lower income spouse earns $60,000 per year. They have two children. Child number one is age 13, and they spent $12,000 on child care for that child during the year. Child number two is 5 years old, and they spent $14,000 per year on that child for child care. So how do we determine the deductible amount of child care for this year? Well, child number one, age 13, has a maximum of only $4,000. Child 2 has only a maximum of 7. So add those two numbers up, we have $11,000. Now, the lower income spouse has earned income of $60,000. 2/3 of that is 40. So it's the lower of three amounts. The combined eligible child care expense is $26,000. The combined deduction limit for the kids is $11,000, and the 2/3 earned income of the lower income spouse is $40,000. In this basic example, then the child care expense deduction for this particular year will be $11,000 for the lower income spouse. That is the most basic example. It can get more complex when you have more children involved, and like when you have a situation where the lower income spouse may be attending school during the year, or maybe in prison, or may be suffering from a physical or mental disability for an indefinite period of time, in which the higher income spouse may be able to claim some of the child care, but that is quite a complex calculation and beyond the scope of this video. If you have any questions on how that would be handled, you can send me an email at peter@supertax.ca or leave a note below. Once again, I hope you found this video informative, and if you have any questions, leave a note below. You can send me an email. My coordinates can be found at www.supertax.ca. My email, once again, peter@supertax.ca. Thank you very much for listening. Take care.